Everyone, and good evening on this lovely day. The sun is shining and I hope you have all made the most of it. Lockdown restrictions have eased today, so hope everyone's gone out and had a walk or something. But welcome to this question and answer evening today, brought to you by Law Simplified. As you've just seen, Sohail Ali is also with us, and she will be in the background, but she will be present for the duration of this evening. So my name is Jasmine Kaur and I'm the Head of Student Affairs for Law Simplified, and I will be hosting this evening. I'd like to welcome our wonderful panel, the wonderful panel we've lined up for you today. They have all kindly agreed to dedicate some of their valuable time for us. So thank you very much to the panel for taking out some precious time for us. Our panel consists of senior legal professionals at top international law firms. So we have Sohail Ali with us, who is a legal director at DLA Piper. And Mr. Ali has considerable experience in international banking and Islamic finance transactions. And I'm sure Sohail will provide a better introduction than I have later on. We also have Mandeep Chima, who is a senior associate at Shoosmiths. She has experience in dispute resolution and litigation. And last but not least, we have Omar Shafi, who is a senior associate at Herbert Smith Freehills, and he has experience in board debt capital markets practice and other financial-based law, and he will also go into detail about that later on. Before we begin, and I open up the floor to the panel for the questions, I would like to just establish some housekeeping. So it would be much appreciated if everyone can keep their videos off and their microphones muted so that there isn't any interruption whilst the questions are being answered. And also finally, the format of this evening will be that initially I will open up the floor to the panelists so that they can provide a better introduction of themselves than I have just done. My introductions haven't done any justice to them. And then we will dive straight into the questions that have been provided by all of you. Just a note on the questions, we've had an incredible response and a wide range of questions that were sent in by our registrants. And due to the time constraints, we've picked 15 questions which will cover all areas and surfaces. And no doubt those questions will ensure that you will leave this evening with something valuable and something new that you've learnt about training contracts. And as you all know, the theme is training contracts and beyond. So as part of their introduction, the panelists will be providing a brief introduction of their journeys into the law and how they've come to the position that they have. So if I could just begin with Mandeep, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Mandeep Chima. I'm a senior associate at Shoosmiths. I've been here for just over 8 years. I did my training contracts. I qualified in 2003, did a couple of years of paralegaling before that. I took the traditional path, uni, LPC, temping, then got my training contract, and I've worked in medium to large firms throughout my career. I think I've done one high street firm, and I think Shoosmiths is probably the largest firm I've worked for. Anything else?
Now if we can move on to Sohail Ali.
Thanks, Jocelyn. So my name is Sohail Ali. I'm a legal director at DLA Piper. I'm currently on a client secondment at the moment at Goldman Sachs. And as you alluded to, Jocelyn, in your opening, I do international litigation and arbitration. I also lead the firm's global Islamic finance disputes practice. I'm also a steering committee member of the firm's race and ethnicity network, which is called Mosaic. And in terms of my career journey today, I was one of those who sort of knew very early on that I wanted to do law. I enjoyed debating at school. I was part of the England English speaking union debating team. I was strong in the art subjects, and I was a regular public speaker on local radio stations growing up. And so for me, and this is even before Suits came out, it seemed like a natural sort of career path. And then in terms of how I ended up here, I went on and studied law at Oxford, but during my second year there, I applied for vacation schemes, and I got placements at Hogan Lovells, Clifford Chance, and Linklaters, and I did placements at all three. But for me, it was the culture, the people, and the experience that I had at Hogan Lovells that stood out, and I accepted a training contract there. I then did my training at Hogan Lovells, and I was fortunate enough to be seconded out to their Dubai office, and I was their first ever secondee there. I then qualified, as you said, into international finance, including Islamic finance, and I spent a total of about 5 years at Hogan Lovells. I then wanted to relocate to Yorkshire because that's where I'm originally from, principally for family reasons, but I didn't want to compromise on that sort of international sort of work that I was doing with those types of clients. But I also fancied a bit of a change, and so I changed practices from being a pure sort of banking lawyer to becoming a contentious lawyer. So I now practice litigation and arbitration. At that time, it felt like a pretty bold change, and that's what I've been doing for the last 7 or 8 years. And I've sort of gone through the ranks at DLA. Initially became senior associate legal director, and now hopefully pushing on towards partnership.
Thank you very much for that. Now, if we can have Omar Shafi introduce himself.
Hi, and thanks, Jocelyn, and warm welcome to everyone this evening. So I'm Omar Shafi. I am a senior associate at HSF. So my career path has been, I guess it's been quite typical in a way that I did a law degree. So I did law with French law at university. And off the back of that, did the usual, same as Sohail, applying for vacation schemes, had a taster of several firms, and I did VAC schemes with, amongst others, HSF and A&O. I ended up sort of accepting A&O for a training contract, spent about 10 years there, and moved over to HSF a couple of years ago. Yeah, it's again, it's sort of a fairly similar size firm, but again, it's all been very much in the same field. I haven't been quite as brave as Sohail, even though I've sort of been tempted many a time by other sort of practice areas. I think it's been very much sort of focusing on one particular area of law. So I'd say that's more of a narrow sort of field, but quite deep knowledge, rather than sort of the broader, which again, there are pros and cons for both. So a lot of respect to Sohail for doing that. Yeah, so I've been here a couple of years and enjoying it, and yeah, happy to pass on any nuggets of information that I can. And it looks as though we've got a nice sort of mix of sort of practice areas and experiences here. So hopefully we'll be able to pass on some knowledge to the participants today.
Thank you very much for your introduction, and to you all for your inspiring journeys into your professions. We'll now start the questions. So let's begin with Sohail. The first question is, what advice do you have for distinguishing training contracts at different law firms? What things should we look for?
I think the most important thing is really to be clear in your mind who it is that you're applying to and why. I think because it is so competitive at the moment, too many people are so desperate just to land a training contract that I don't think enough thought probably goes into finding out about the firm and if it's the right firm for you as much as it is the other way around. Because I think sometimes we forget that It's you choosing the right firm for you as opposed to the firm just choosing you. And I always think whatever you do in life, you've got to have a bit of a passion for it. And so if you're applying to a city firm, and I'll give my example of say DLA, be clear in your mind. Do you know what makes DLA different to any other firm? What's our USP, for example, and why do you want to work here? Because if I was to throw that question out there, all the major law firms, they've got international offices. They all work for great corporate clients. They all pay broadly the same amount of money. So ask yourself, why do I want to work there as opposed to, say, a HSF? Because ultimately, that's what these firms want to know. And I think what firms are very, very clever at is sensing what is a generic copy and paste, half-hearted sort of response, and the HR and graduate recruitment are sort of experts at spotting that. So do your research. So if I was to just give the example of DLA, DLA prides itself on being really a truly global law firm. That's its strapline. You go on their website, that's what it says. And I don't know if it's still true, but a couple of years ago, it was the biggest law firm in the world in terms of size and in terms of international coverage. So ask yourself, is that something that attracts you, or is that something that puts you off? But then what about the particular strengths of the firm? And I don't think there's any firm that has the Africa coverage that DLA does. DLA sees that as a huge market, and it's invested heavily over recent years, and that's a real USP. Again, is that something that attracts you? Because if it is, that's the differentiating factor that you should be putting down in your application form. And what about the sort of clients that these law firms are acting for? Again, we're probably a lot more political than other firms in terms of the work that we do for governments and the sorts of relationships that we have. So demonstrating and having all of this in your application form really, I think, demonstrates that you know the firm and its particular strengths. And I would just say, take that time and effort really into that application stage, because if you genuinely find something interesting and you have that passion, it should normally come through in your application. Now, again, just a couple of examples. Oswang, known for its sort of tech and media practice. Carter Ruck, known for its defamation practice. Don't just put, I want to work for a city law firm because it's a commercial firm. These are the sorts of things I think you should try and bring out in your application forms.
Thank you for that, Sohail. And the next question is for Mandeep. What resources do you advise we look at for researching law firms?
Well, obviously there's the website and social media. Follow them on Twitter, LinkedIn. But it's not just about one thing that Shoosmiths looks at, and it's actually following on from what Sohail said, is in an application, in an interview, we want to know that you've actually taken the time to get to know what the firm is. Now, Shoosmiths isn't international. We don't pretend to be. We don't want to be. We are very much based. We've got 13, I think it might be 15 offices around the country now. So if somebody is looking for an international placement training contract, that's what they want. And as Sohail says, you can tell generic applications, you can see them a mile off. So it's not just about, don't just look at the work they do, delve deeper into the website. Our website, for example, has got loads, it's got a whole section on grad recruitment, what it's actually got on there, what you should look for when you're researching law firms, and what sort of questions you'll get asked, what sort of questions you might want to ask. So just delve deeper, and there's actually a lot on there about our firm's culture. One of the biggest things for our firm is living our values, we call it. So we have pulling together, talking business sense, being within reach and responsive, and taking initiative. And those values feed through every single stage of the career, from the post room to the CEO. Whenever, even when somebody goes for an internal promotion, when you've got to fill out your applications and all the rest of it, everything pulls back to those values. And it's those sorts of values that we'll be looking for. Somebody that has taken the time to find those things out. So just delve deeper, and obviously see if you can do placements. They are quite competitive. We do insight evenings where we do them at different times, different offices, so you can get to know just a little bit more about how the firm works, and there's different levels of staff that attend them. Law fairs, get to know, don't be afraid to go up and ask questions and make contact with people. It's really tempting at these law fairs. So I know it's difficult now with them being virtual, but it's really easy to go around collecting brochures and not actually, but take the time to talk to the people there. And then there's people nowadays, young people probably know about it more than I do because it wasn't around when I was applying, but Law Careers Net and All About Law, I'm sure that's familiar to a lot of people. I couldn't tell you more about what they do because I think I'm a bit out of the game now. But look at the process as well. Like, for example, we do an application form, then we do a video. So what happens is, through a platform, you're given, so I think you get some tests, you get some like a test run, where you get a couple of test questions. Through this platform, you're asked a question, and it's not just to test your knowledge, it's to test how you might fit in, what you've learned about the firm. So one of our graduate recruitment people will ask you a question, and then you're given 2 minutes to answer, and it will record you and it will cut you off, and you have a countdown timer. That is part of our training contract recruitment. Then you go to, so you've got your application, then you've got your video interview, which isn't live, so it's recorded, and then you have assessment centres, and that's where there'll be interviews. So you really need to make an impression on paper first, and don't be generic. Look at the area of law that you want to do, because you can tell somebody that is just looking for a foot in the door, and it can be quite off-putting, to be honest. Okay.
Thank you, Mandeep. And now the next question for Omar. Would you advise a student or a graduate to take the LPC or the SQE route?
Okay, well, I'll have to admit I'd had to do a bit of research on this beforehand. I think, again, same as Mandeep, a little bit out of the loop nowadays. I think I've gone beyond thinking about exams and things. So so from an HSF perspective, and I think this is probably going to be spreading around a lot of the city law firms, I think people are now moving towards the SQE, and we have been having a number of sort of working groups where, for example, the training principals, or even graduate recruitment, or the training sort of HR staff have been asking questions about what makes a good trainee, what makes a good training contract. And I think the focus has now become more on the individual experience and sort of getting the best product, rather than trying to fit everyone within a framework, which I think is what the LPC was in sort of the old style training contract. A lot of it was, it was box checking. You had to do certain things just to pass to the next level. It's not to say that, for example, you have to do things like wills and probate on the LPC, or you had to do, various modules. If you didn't have an interest in that, that was, again, just something you had to clear. I think now it's becoming a little bit more tailored. And as I mentioned, a lot of the law firms are now moving towards the SQE. So I think for the question, I'd say that you might not even have a choice going forward. I think it's looking as though a lot of firms are moving towards the SQE. I think it has its benefits as well. So, for example, a lot of people who have not been able to get their foot in the door with a training contract, for example, have paralegaled at large firms, and I think it's a great way. It's a great way not only to get a name on your CV, get some experience, but you can also showcase your talents to the team, to partners, to the law firm. And I've seen people get training contracts at Magic Circle firms off the back of paralegaling. So it's actually a very good way of doing it. And with an SQE route, you could potentially then use the time spent paralegaling towards your qualification. So I think it's great in that regard. And quite frankly, I don't really see a problem with, if you've got paralegal in your signature block or trainee solicitor, why that should matter. So I think that's a good change, that, experience is experience. So I think SQE will be good. And I think it will result in a sort of a more well-rounded lawyer. I know that they use, phrases such as O-shaped lawyer. Ultimately in practice, I think what it's going to mean is that people are more focused on the key skills, and at the end of the process you'll be shaping trainees who are just better suited to the job. And I don't think that the LPC really sets you up well for life, particularly in a city law firm. I think I can't comment on, for example, in maybe I know Mandeep mentioned she had one job in a high street law firm. I don't know if it helps in that regard at all, but it was certainly not for the type of stuff that I do, for example. It just didn't. It was just like chalk and cheese. It wasn't the same thing. So I found that it was just a year that I had to get through, really. And I think by that stage, a lot of people are quite keen to start work, and it was a bit of a delaying factor in a lot of people's careers. So hopefully the SQE will be positive. But to answer the question, I'm not even sure you'll have a choice, but people do look like they're focusing on the SQE.
Can I just jump in there and just to say, I think it's the same for high street firms. I don't think the LPC particularly sets you up very well. It teaches you the mechanics. For example, I've done litigation. That's what I do, trust and estate disputes. But I mean, it's still CPR, no matter what you're doing. And so you learn the mechanics of it, but actually the practice, and I know we're going to talk about life beyond the training contract, it doesn't really prepare you for actually what you're going to be doing in the job.
Thank you, Omar and Mandeep. And now the next question is open to all of you. What sort of extracurricular or other experiences can help us stand out for the application process? Please, could you also name some organizations if you are aware of any, if possible?
Well,
you go, Mandy. Go
I was just going to say, I was interviewing recently and I saw a CV for somebody, and what really stood out was he just finished his LPC, and since his second year of uni, he had been doing anything and everything that, any of these sorts of free legal clinics, all of that kind of stuff. He'd been volunteering and whatever he could get his hands on experience-wise, he'd been doing it. So that really did make a difference to his application.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And also, my degree I mentioned was a 4-year, I don't know if I mentioned actually, it was a 4-year degree. So it was law with French law. I think actually doing something different at a degree level can help. I don't know if that's too late to be telling people on this call, but it can help give you, and I felt for me, it makes you stand out of the crowd slightly. And I spent a year abroad as well. I think that was a formative year as well. And I think it gave me a lot to talk about at interview when people asked about what's been the biggest challenge in your life. I think for a lot of people, in your late teens, early 20s, if you've had a sort of let's say a middle class upbringing, you haven't had that many challenges, to be honest. You've gone to school, you've had exams. And it was actually quite difficult going out there, living in a different country, having to learn a language, something like that. I think it just shows resilience, it shows skills. And I think even with Mandeep's example there, it's not necessarily just about the sort of the volunteering or doing something. It's actually showing what sort of a person you are. Mm-hmm. And I think for me as well, having had a lot of trainees over the years, I think everyone sort of has that base level of intellect and ability. I think the things that really differentiate people are attitudes, and it's the sort of thing that I always look out for in an interview or with a trainee. It's just, what sort of a person is this? Are they willing to learn? Are they willing to go the extra mile? Or are they just going to do the bare minimum and think that I won't notice? So I think that sort of thing is, if you can do things to demonstrate that, if it's Mandeep's example of, someone volunteering or whatever it might be, if it's going out to learn another language, even if it's attending something like this today, it's about trying to get out there and get that extra bit of information. And that's the sort of thing that I think you get into the top 10% by, making that effort, taking that extra step. So I think, it's just looking out for those opportunities. And there are a number of organizations out there who are, really focused on this now. I know people like SEO London, there's Rare, there's a lot of things very much focused on lawyers, particularly ethnic minority lawyers as well, budding lawyers. I think there's a huge amount of resource out there, so you've just got to find it and apply. And but ultimately, I think you just need to, show willing. And if you were questioned in an interview, think, well, what could I say that I've done that's different to the next candidate, and you just want to make sure that you're sort of demonstrating that.
If I can just add something to that, I think one thing that's really important. I think it's really important to be demonstrating those skills, as Mandeep and Omar have just alluded to. But I think the other thing just to be mindful of is that interviewers are humans. What they're looking for is someone that's genuine and someone that they can relate to. I'm a huge cricket fan, and I'd rather sit there and talk to someone who's passionate about stuff outside of work as well. And I think it's so important to be well-rounded individuals and have genuine hobbies and interests. So I remember at my DLA interview when I first came, I probably spent half the time just debating with the partners who should be picked for the next Ashes test match and trying to justify my response. And I guess what they were trying to work out was work me out as much as a person by softly testing my ability to reason and debate with logic, but also they genuinely had those sort of interests. And I think what I would warn against is I sometimes get students sending me CVs or application forms to have a look at, and they'll put down extracurricular activities that they clearly don't do or they clearly don't mean. So I love reading or I love traveling, and yet they hate reading and they don't travel. But they feel as though it's the right answer to put down. I think, in addition to the things that Mandeep and Omar have suggested you do, also be genuine, because ultimately a law firm is a business, and we have to go out and talk to clients, and they're humans and they're people, and we have to network with them. And actually, if you've got genuine interests, if you're genuinely interested in cricket or football or some other sports, don't be shy of putting that down, because ultimately when you're taking your clients out, that's how you build a rapport with them. And that's how I build my rapport with my clients. So whatever you have a real passion for, don't be shy of expressing that, because as law firms, we're looking for more than just book nerds and just technical lawyers. We're looking for people who are personable, and who have genuine and proper interests. So I would just reaffirm that view. So don't shy away from setting those out.
Thank you. We're going to stay with you, Sohail. The next question is for you. What are your thoughts on the in-house training contracts? Is it possible to move over to a law firm after completing the training there?
I'm probably not the best person to answer this question, as I've not actually gone down this route. But I certainly don't think it's not possible to move to a law firm after completing your training in-house. My view, and this is solely my view, is that obviously the nature of the institution where you are doing your in-house training contract, that can vary hugely. So the more coveted the institution as a client, for example, the more likely it will be for you to move across to a law firm after you've completed your training. And the reason for that is simple. If you've done your training, for example, and I'm currently at Goldman Sachs, if that's where you are, it's a wonderful place to be. Law firms, I see it day in, day out, they're chomping at the bit to build relationships and get their foot into the door with a client such as Goldman Sachs. So if you've trained there and you've built relationships there, that's hugely valuable, because law firms are looking to build those networks anyway. And so that's why they send people like me on secondment to firms like Goldman Sachs, because they want me to go and build relationships. Clearly, not all institutions will have the same sort of appeal and pull to private law firms. So I would say be mindful of where you do your in-house training and where you'd like to be long term. So in some respects, don't just do it just because you think it's a nice, easy option, but think about where you want to be long term. The key difference is, I think, between a law firm and doing your practice in-house is, one is a corporate body, and it's not set up to act as a law firm. They're there as a business. So if you take the example of Amazon or an Apple, they don't set out to litigate, for example. They don't set out to get involved in disputes. So the experience you will get as a litigation lawyer might not necessarily be the same that you would get in private practice. And in private practice, you will get more hands-on, you'll get much more technical skills. And I think that's really important as a junior lawyer. So if I was to give some advice, what I would probably say is, I would say, if you can, take the benefit of doing a training contract in a law firm, because what you do is you build up those really vital technical skills, particularly in the early stages of your career, rather than do it the other way around, because I think it's much harder. You can always go in-house after you've trained in a private practice law firm than it is to go the other way. But again, as I say, you pick up a different skill set, and ultimately, if that's where you want to be long term, in-house, in a corporate, in an institution, and you get an opportunity to work there, by all means, take it.
Thank you. And the next question is for Mandeep. Do law firms put a lot of importance on the geographic location of the candidate when deciding on whether or not to offer them a training contract? And how can this hurdle be overcome?
It'll be interesting to hear what Sohail has to say, because I'm a national law firm, not international. So from our point of view, I mean, the obvious answer to me was, well, move. But obviously for an international, that's not as easy. But actually with Shoosmiths, we have office-specific applications for training contracts, and they vary year to year. So like most big firms, we recruit 2 years in advance, and it really depends on where the placements are going to be. So, but just generally, I think you need to think about the lifestyle that you want. I mean, it's perfectly fine if, like you've gone to uni in London and you want to move back up north, and so you're applying to firms up there, and you get asked the question, well, you live down there, and you just say, well, my family's here, I want to move back up here, this is where I see my long-term future. You have to show commitment, I think, wherever you want to eventually end up. Or the other way around, if you go to uni somewhere and that's where you decide you're going to stay, I think it's ultimately where you see yourself for the foreseeable future. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen after the training contract ends. And then I've forgotten what I was going to say. Oh, how the hurdle can be overcome. I think that you need to seriously think about whether or not you actually are willing to move. Don't just apply for the sake of applying. I think that's just a theme throughout. You need to look into the offices, and that's what I was going to say. Doing a training contract in London is going to be very different to doing it in Birmingham or Edinburgh or whatever their version, because we have offices in Edinburgh and over in Belfast as well. So you need to think about where it's going to be and what sort of experience you're going to get, just in terms of the type of work you get as well. I mean, we have, across all offices, cover most areas, where, for example, the corporate teams are spread up and down the country, as is our contentious trusts and estates team. But you need to think about where you want to be, and it's about the culture of, as a trainee, the culture of the work that you're going to be getting, and the nature of the clients as well.
Thank you. And Sohail and Omar, do you have anything to add about the location of the training contract?
I'll just make two very quick points. I totally agree with Mandeep. Two additional points I'd make. One is giving a training contract is actually, it might seem like it's not a big deal, but it's actually a huge investment on the part of a law firm. There's a lot of money that goes into the training, and therefore what they are looking for is they're looking for candidates who are committed, as Mandeep says. If they get the sense that someone has just put in an application just to land a training contract, but actually everything connected to him or her is in a different location, I think law firms are getting pretty astute at working that out. So that's the point I would make, because they like to, if they give you a training contract, it's in their interest to keep you on, because it's a big investment. They teach you the ways that their firm works. The other point I'd make, and it's a bit of an unknown at the moment, is what impact COVID will have. I mean, I'm on secondment at the moment, and I've been working entirely remotely for the last 5 or 6 months, and I've probably, prior to that, only spent a handful of days in the office since last year. And I think what people have started to realize is that you can do that job and that function whilst working remotely, because historically, if you wanted to work in London, but but wanted to live in the regions or wanted to live outside in the suburbs, it was almost frowned upon. It was almost seen as unworkable. People now have realized that actually we can work remotely, we can be trusted to work remotely. And I think that will change the dynamics, certainly in terms of associates and senior associates and moving in-house. Whether that's true for trainees, I'm not sure, but it'll be interesting to see how that pans out, because I think the mindset certainly has shifted somewhat. So if someone, I guess what I'm saying is, if someone wants to be in a slightly different location long term, say for example they want to be in Yorkshire but they want to do their training contract in London, I'm not sure necessarily if it's within the same firm they would be that averse, because it's within the same firm and they can probably utilize your time and experience across offices. But that'll be an interesting one and see how the cookie crumbles.
Thank you. Omar, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think to echo what's just been said there, and I think taking the question in a slightly different direction as well. I think when I've had trainees and I've been discussing career options with them, I've always encouraged them to think about where they see themselves in 5 or 10 years. And as Sohail mentioned there, he's obviously he's made a move back up to Yorkshire. Now, for me, I do debt capital markets. There's no debt capital markets up in Yorkshire, and it's actually in the UK. It would just be London. You have to look at financial centres across the globe. So I'm very much I've pigeonholed myself into a particular niche area, and that means then having to live in particular areas. So I think it's a point for when you do your training contract or pick your particular law firm that you're applying to, think about what do they specialise in, and does that fit in with my 5 to 10 year plan? Because there's no point becoming, for example, a DCM lawyer, then deciding that actually I wanted to move back up north and be near my family or settle elsewhere, because it's just not going to work. And I take Sohail's point about COVID, but it's I think people are still required to come in every now and then. So I think it's just something to think about. But people don't, law firms don't necessarily discriminate. But I think it's equally that something that you could get unstuck if when asked, you then, as Sohail mentioned, you show that you're literally just trying to get a name on a CV and you're going to head back up afterwards. That's the sort of thing that can then scupper your application. But I don't think seeing someone from Bolton would necessarily, well, I don't know, it might do, but it shouldn't really sort of prohibit or diminish your chances of a training contract.
Okay, thank you, Omar. And we're just going to stay with you because the next question's for you. Are a candidate's extenuating circumstances seriously considered by law firms?
I would hope so, and I think it's one of those that it's. And to be clear, as an associate, we don't really see a lot of that. So I don't really see what people are putting in their applications. I know that they do certainly look at them. I think, and I have seen certain applications where there's been a range of extenuating circumstances. Some of them are very clear. Some of them you think that might be a bit of a push. So I think if there's something that's serious and something that's definitely impacted you, by all means, contact graduate recruitment, for example, beforehand if you like to discuss it and maybe add a bit of colour. I think it's sometimes difficult to actually put it down on, in your application, put it down in words. So it's probably worth just having a chat. But I can't say for sure. I mean, you certainly hope that they would, and they've all got a box for extenuating circumstances. So, it's there for a reason. But having said that, that's not to say that just because you put something down that they'll, immediately take it into account. I think they'll give you a bit of waiting. But it depends on exactly what the circumstances are.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is for Sohail. What tips would you give for assessment centres and how to stand out from all the other candidates?
It's been a few years since I did an assessment centre, so I don't know if the structure and format perhaps may have changed. But I think if we start with the basics and start with what law firms are looking for, and then we work backwards from there, I think the basic principles should remain true. So in essence, law firms, they're looking for candidates with commercial awareness. They want to know that candidates have an understanding of what's going on around them in the corporate world. They're looking for people who are confident. They're looking for people who are personable, who can work independently, but can also work in a team environment. And I think in an assessment, these are all the sorts of things that they're looking to draw out. So really, I think what you want to be demonstrating is that you understand the types of issues that are relevant in a corporate law firm, for example. So when I did an assessment, and this is going back, 10, 15 years, I was given a scenario of there's an oil leak that has taken place somewhere in the North Sea. Someone has called you up in a frenzy. You're a lawyer, by the way, and is looking for urgent advice. What do you do? And I think the important thing to remember in that sort of scenario is that no one is looking for a technical or the perfect answer. You're not being expected to give advice. And that's, I think, as a student or junior paralegal or someone trying to get a training contract, sometimes sort of think that they need to jump to the answer. What they're looking to see is how, your thought process and how would you go about a scenario such as that. So it's deliberately designed to be slightly urgent. It's designed to be slightly panicky. How do you react in that situation? So, the things that you should be thinking about in a scenario such as that, for example, is, are you thinking about conflicts? Is this an existing client? Or is this an entirely new client? So rather than just giving any old advice straight away, is this someone that's going to potentially be someone that you can't act for? For example, you might be an insurer and you don't want to be giving you don't want your lawyers or law firm to be giving advice to a potential insured. So conflicts, can you act for that sort of client? Do we need to check that? Do you need to speak to other people within the firm? Is there a risk element here? Subject to all of that, you want to be thinking about what are the immediate risks that arise out of a scenario such as that. So environmental damage, insurance, like I said, potential litigation risk, regulatory concerns. These are all the sorts of things and risks that potentially emanate from a scenario such as that. And it's just about articulating and conveying really a sensible and logical thought process rather than a perfect answer. The other thing I think that it's really important, and this is something that I remember vividly from my assessment center, is they want to know how you will work and operate as part of a team. So don't think you have to be the loudest person in that team environment, in that assessment center, and that you have to speak the most. And in fact, I think it can probably be counterproductive if you are sort of overbearing and talking too much. And nor do you want to be that person who's just sat there in the corner, who's obstinately making a point, refusing to accept any other viewpoint from someone else. So you think that you've made a point and therefore now you have to stand behind it and you will not accept anyone tell you otherwise. If someone makes a good point, be prepared to accept it. Be prepared to pivot and demonstrate that sort of collegiate, personable team bonding sort of skills. That's what they're looking. They want to see, can you work in a team? Can you take different views and accept people's viewpoints? So you've got to come across as a team player. So those are a couple of the things that I would suggest you bear in mind for an assessment center.
Thank you, Sohail. Mandeep, what is the one thing which makes applicants stand out during a training contract interview? And can you share any of your own experiences of interviewing candidates?
Well, we have a grad recruitment team, so we don't ordinarily get involved with training contract interviews, but all other staff levels I'm involved in interviewing, and recently I've been interviewing for paralegals. So I'll say the one thing. So first of all, is I don't even see the CVs when they are the first round of CVs go to our recruitment team. They are then sifted through and a shortlist is given to, and then I think I had about 10, 12 CVs. And then, and to get to even that stage, they've already got a really good level of academics. And so then what I did was I set a problem question specific to our area of law. And I gave them the law because I wasn't looking for the law. I wanted to see how they would, so I gave them scenario and the law. I wanted to see how they would structure it, how they would answer the question. And I was looking for, were they going to pick up on funding issues? Were they going to pick up on limitation? Were they going to pick up on who the beneficiaries of the estate were, who the defendants would be? So it was just the extra bits that and how did they approach it? How did they structure it? So we got down to 3, and all of them, you know, really good academics, and could have given the job to any one of them. And ultimately what it came down to is the one that had was going to fit in, showed the most personality, and also had looked into the firm and how they were going to fit into the culture of the firm. And I did actually speak to our grad recruitment team before today, because I thought, well, let me see what, and all the way through what just kept coming out was research your firm, be proactive. It's the ones that are proactive in finding things out and can show that they've taken the time to get to know what the firm's about, that come across well. And have questions prepared. And the thing is, if all your questions are answered, and at the end you get asked, have you got any questions, and you say no, well, that might come across as, oh, I didn't bother to think of any questions. Or you could just turn it on its head and say, oh, I haven't actually, because I was going to ask you about this, this and this, but actually we've already covered it, so thank you very much. Just shows that you've been proactive, because if you just said no, you're missing the opportunity to show that you'd actually taken the time to find out this information. And one thing is, you can tell if somebody is trying to get their foot in the door. And there was somebody in this process that had an amazing CV, etc., but was not interested in our area of law at all. Did not want, and not in a bad way, but didn't really was very open about the fact that they just wanted to get into Shoosmiths. And the questions were all about, right, so is internal recruitment different to like a job's advertised internally first before they go externally? How closely do you work with this department, that department? And that person didn't get the job, but actually a big factor was that I felt like I would be taking the opportunity away from somebody that was genuinely interested in our area of law. And being a paralegal in Shoosmiths doesn't really give you an edge in having a training contract, in succeeding. My grad recruitment lady today said to me that it's very rare to be successful on your first try. Most people are successful on their second or third tries, because I don't know about other firms, but what we do is if you're not successful, you get a 15-minute phone call from somebody in the grad recruitment team afterwards to give you feedback. And that's a learning opportunity, and people reapply. And the fact that you applied in the past applications aren't looked at. So it's you really have to show that you want to be in that firm, you want to do that type of work, because you can really tell if somebody is just wanting to get their foot in the door.
Thank you, Mandeep. That's very interesting. The next question is for Omar. Please describe life as an associate after the completion of a training contract from personal experience.
It's amazing. That's it. No, it's tough. It's tough. I remember day one, sort of sending out that very first email, you know, the responsibility. I think as a trainee, you've got that safety net, trainee solicitor. Day one, there's a lot of responsibility, and I think you've no longer got sort of your trainer sitting there looking out for you. I need to go out there and make a name for myself. So I think that for me was probably the biggest thing. I personally think that, you know, as a trainee, actually just career-wise, you've got, you know, your career is never linear. At the beginning it sort of is, but I think it sort of then starts tailing off. You'll see certain people really accelerate and, you know, pull out all the stops. Some people will just go into cruise control. And I think that starts from, it does in a way start from your training contract, but day one as an associate, that's you, fresh start, fresh title. And it's make or break. And I think in that first year or two, I really, really worked hard, because I thought that actually this is where I'm going to make my name. And this is where I could potentially sort of get an in with a few partners who then might start giving me work. So I think in that nutshell, it was very busy. and there was a lot to learn, but I think it was incredibly satisfying, you know, and just having the just having that first email where you've got associate after your name, it's a good feeling. I think everyone remembers, you know, that first deal that they did. And it's the same when you become a senior associate, you know, that first email you send with a senior associate, you're very proud of that tag. So yeah, it was busy, lot of responsibility, and I think just generally you felt, I don't know, for me, I worked in a big firm, you felt a little bit more respected internally, I think. And I don't know if that was just a personal thing, but I think having the trainee solicitor tag, you were sometimes seen as just sort of the bottom rung of the deal team. As an associate, you know, you could be a 4-year qualified associate or a brand new associate. No one really knows. You just have associate after your name. So it felt good in that regard. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone else has anything else to chip in there. Any sort of great stories of what they did on day one as as an associate. But I think ultimately for me, it was a make or break. So that first 6 months was make or break. So, but if anyone's got a good story, I mean, go ahead. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't I don't have anything other than a lot of hard work.
I've got a lot to say on this because I think it's a shock to the system. It's a massive shock because you are protected as a trainee. One thing that you don't really learn about on the LPC is the actual commercial, the business side of law, cost estimates, billing, chargeable hours, all of that. So where I trained was not where I ended up. And I worked for a panel firm that did insurance work. And it was paid per transaction. So there was no chargeable time, there was no nothing. And after I'd qualified and I'd moved on into different firms, and as I've moved across different firms, it's the commercial realities of you can't just write off time. You've got to, your file, you know, your work has to be profitable. You can, and as a junior lawyer, you can spend a lot of time researching something, but you can't necessarily charge a client for. And that is a big shift, actually. I think you're given a lot of leeway when you're a paralegal or a trainee, because people expect you, they know it's going to take you some time. But then actually, then all of a sudden, that safety net's gone, and you know, your work is a lot more chargeable, less of your time is going to be written off. And things like the litigators amongst us will know, cost budgets. All of a sudden in litigation, you know, the CPR keeps changing. I was qualified when the CPR was overhauled, LASPO and all of that. And all of a sudden we had to do these precedent H's, where before we had allocation questionnaires, and it used to be what are your costs now and how much do you think they'll be to trial, and it was 2 boxes. And then all of a sudden we had to have detailed schedules for every single stage of the litigation process, and you get penalised if you're more than 10% out once your cost budget's set. And it's that side of things that I think nobody can teach you. Figuring out, you're given a client, in litigation it is, and I tell my clients this, it's a how long is a piece of string question when they ask me, how much is this going to cost me? And it only comes with experience that you think about the similar types of cases that you've dealt with, well, and you can only give them ballparks, and you have to be honest. And I say to my clients, I'm not being deliberately vague, but so much depends on how your case is going to progress, how your opponent actually behaves. I mean, I've got a case which should have cost 15,000 plus VAT. We're on 80 plus VAT now. And I act for individuals. So that's a lot of money for somebody. And the reason is purely because of how the opponent has behaved. And it's that side of things that I think is a real shock to the system. But you need to know the reality of the area of work that you're going to go into, and that is, it's really nice and exciting and all the rest of it to get a training contract, but this is what's on the other side.
I'll just make 2 observations as well. I think it's the overnight responsibility that changes with that title. As both Omar and Mandeep said, you're somewhat protected when you're a trainee, and you have that whilst the responsibility is great when you're an associate. you can allow other people to make slightly more tricky and challenging decisions. And what's can be quite daunting is that you go from being a fourth seat trainee last day to overnight being an associate, and all of a sudden the expectations jump up rapidly. But you haven't learned anything more in those 24 hours. But you've just gone from being a trainee to an associate. But the expectations from clients change. The expectations from internal colleagues change because they no longer view you as a trainee, you're an associate. And I think Omar was calling out for war stories. I don't think I've got a war story, but I just remember I qualified in September, and I was only 2 or 3 months into my sort of associate career. And essentially I realized that I made the mistake, and people should budding lawyers should be aware, I made the mistake of just volunteering to not take any Christmas leave and working over Christmas. And being a banking and finance lawyer, essentially everyone wanted to just wrap up their deals before the end of the year. All the partners, all the senior associates, all the off counsel decided to go on holiday. Everyone left me a fantastic handover note, had little to no experience on executing or finalizing these deals. And it was the most stressful, daunting time of my career to date. But people just expect you, because you're a associate now rather than a trainee, that you'll be able to get this over the line. And actually, if it really comes down to it, you'll reach out to them. So it can be very, very challenging and daunting. But and some law firms have a different culture in terms of how they treat their associates. So again, it's worth researching that, because again, I've not experienced a US firm, but they say a US firm gives far more responsibility to its associates. So the way they structure their teams is the associates are expected to carry the burden, and there's always notoriously this suggestion you either sink or swim in a US firm. So just do a bit of research to see whether or not that's the type of firm you want to be in, or whether you'd prefer a bit more support. Again, I qualify that having not worked in a US firm. It's just what I've heard. But the other point I'd say is it's an incredibly exciting time as well, because what you get given is the opportunity now to build client relationships and get involved in BD, which as a trainee, it's more difficult to do. I think people recognize that when you're an associate, this is the department that you are in for the long term, unless it's me, for example, and you change. But you're in it for the long term. And therefore, if you're working with, say, a bank client, it's important for you as a junior lawyer to get to know the in-house counsel team. So people are more prepared to invest, and law firms are more prepared for you to go and get involved in client entertainment, because those junior counsel that you are building relationships with and networking with, ultimately, when you're senior associate, when you're legal director, when you're a partner, they're going to be going up the ranks with you. So there is that really exciting stage of your career where you can actually go out and get involved proactively in business development, and that's quite nice. And you develop those relationships, and you can start to own those relationships. So an exciting time, as well as a slightly daunting, perhaps, time initially.
Thank you to everyone for that. The next question is for you, Sohail. What does it mean to be a legal director and senior associate, and what is the distinction between them apart from the level of experience?
So the term legal director is used obviously at my firm. I think other firms perhaps will use slightly different terms or concepts. So it's not a generic term that's used across the industry. So I think, for example, the firm that I was at previously, they don't have a legal director role. They have an off-counsel role. So it's a similar sort of role, but perhaps not the same terminology that's being used. I think at most firms, a legal director is a recognition of a certain type of role. So it can either be a stepping stone for partnership, or for some people for whom partnership is not the end goal, it can be a role which reflects their status, their seniority, their experience, rather than just being labeled as a senior associate. So you can almost view it as they would potentially be capable of getting partnership, but perhaps they choose not to go for it because it works for them, or it doesn't work for them. And in terms of what the role entails, again, at my firm, what the title sort of comes with is greater responsibility. So you're expected to start acting and behaving more akin to a partner, to be leading teams, to be generating work, to be more of a role model to others within the firm in terms of behaviors and values and standards, a point that I think Mandeep made very articulately. So I think what the key difference is, it's you've got to step up to that next role, that position, and clients also have more expectations and also confidence knowing that they're dealing with someone a bit more senior and not necessarily requiring partner presence for certain types of things. So there's a greater sort of trust that comes with being recognized as a legal director or an off counsel.
And the next question is for Mandeep. In your view, what skills or qualities make a good trainee solicitor?
From a practical point of view, and this is something that stayed with me throughout my career, was learning how to do lists of documents and bundles. And it sounds silly, but there have been instances, even now, the thing is, as you go up the ranks, you become less involved in that side of things, but you need to get a good grounding. You need to be proactive. So if somebody gives you a piece of work or you're involved, take ownership of it. Don't just say, right, well, I was told to do that bit, here you go, and pass it back, or don't wait to be told the next thing to do. See if there's something else. I mean, I can only talk about it in my, litigation. Oh, we've had a response in from the other side, and if the trainees had a look at it and thought, well, actually, I've had a look at it, and this is what I think, and have the basis of a response ready, that kind of thing, and be a team player. You are working in a team, and you will probably be working for maybe a number of different people. So you need to be able to prioritize your work. And what can happen is, and I'm sure it's true across all firms, is everybody thinks their work is the most important, and you end up with 4 different things to do at the same time. Don't be afraid to push back and say, okay, this is what I've got to do by this time. Whose is more important? What's more urgent? Have a go at trying to prioritize it yourself, and you can say, well, this is what I think needs to be done. If anybody, this is what I'm going to do. And the thing is, if you're working for partners, people might not always get back to you. They so you can just say, this is what I'm going to do, unless somebody tells me otherwise. Take ownership, be proactive. If there's a problem, don't just go to your principal and say, oh, this is how, and expect to be told what the answer is. Go with a solution. It might be the wrong one, but have a think about. You want to be able to show that you've had to think about what the solution could be to the issue that you're facing, because that's how you develop. And even if it's the wrong answer, even if it could be totally wrong, or it could spark a conversation and actually be, oh, well, actually, that's a really good idea. It's a chance to develop your ideas, because, like we've all said, it is a bit of a shock to the system, the level of responsibility you have when you qualify. So it's a nice opportunity at the time you're a trainee to actually hone those skills and develop those skills. And you want to be trustworthy. And I'm sure that by the time people get to training contract stage, they are going to be. You don't want to be known as the flaky one. You don't want to be pushed, chased for pieces of work. Manage your work, learn the basics. I'm a really big believer in nobody is too high up the ranks to do any job. And that's where where you start to hone your skills, is as trainee. And the networking, learn from people. Don't think that I'm a trainee, I don't need this yet. You never know when you're going to need it. For example, the networking side of things, it's not taught. It's something that you learn from seeing other people. Take opportunities to go to networking events if they're there. I know it's difficult, but get to know the other trainees, organise things. So you never know what. And as Sohail was saying, these are the people that you're going to move up the ranks with. It's about building relationships, and I think that you should start as soon as you get your foot in the door at a firm.
Thank you very much for that. And the next question is open to all. Please tell us about the commercial realities of being an associate. Are associates required to find their own work?
Yeah, we have to find our own senior associates, principal associates. We do. So generally, it's the partners that bring in work, but as you go up the ranks, we do bring in our own work, and it's a good experience to get. So as the higher up the ranks you go, the more the expectation on you to be able to bring in work. And I think I've already spoken about the commercial realities of it, and that is, it's something that you can't get away from, I think, no matter what type of firm you work for.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear what Omar has to say as well. I think in a slightly bigger international law firm, you can probably get away with, at an associate level, not being expected to bring in the work. I think as an associate, you're expected to, especially if you're a very junior associate, you're expected to demonstrate the skills and the traits that ultimately will help you bring in the work. But it's about doing the job properly. Attention to detail is so important. Building up that technical knowledge and know-how in a particular area of law. So if you're a banking lawyer, really getting to know your area, and then building those relationships. So you start to build those networks from an associate level, but at a large international firm, I think it's recognized that as an associate, you're not necessarily going to be bringing in the work, because a lot of the clients are institutionalized, but you start to learn the traits and you start to pick up the skills needed. But I don't know if that chimes, Omar, or it's different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think normally you're trying to bat away work and dodge it, I think, as an associate in an international firm. So I think that's, and it was quite interesting to hear Mandeep say that, because that's definitely not been my experience. And I think the nearer you get to partnerships as a senior associate, that's the sort of thing where if you can demonstrate clients won, that's fantastic. And it shows that, you've potentially got a business case. I think we mentioned it a few times today that, we are ultimately a business. And it's all about profitability and making money, and you don't just get made up to partner because you're a good lawyer. You need to be able to bring something to the party, essentially. So that's a business case. So that's the key thing, and that's something that I didn't really sort of, I think, grasp as a sort of a student, was that it can actually matter which seat you decide to qualify into, because you might want to look who are the partners in that team. What sort of business case could I potentially bring in 10 years time? Are all the partners going to be coming up to retirement in 10 years time? That's great. Or have they just made up, or all the partners, for example, in their mid 30s, and by the time I come around to going for partnership, are they going to be mid 40s and there's no chance for me? So those sorts of things are those are the commercial realities I think you need to think about. Actually, it's if you want to go for partnership, I mean, it's not for everyone, but if you want to go for partnership, you need to think about business cases, think about clients, and to Sohail's point there about associates not bringing in work, I think that's correct on paper. That a lot of the clients are big institutions, and they're not going to hire an associate for the work. They're going to go to the partner, but the partner, it depends on how the team is run. They might not actually be that active in the day-to-day running of the matter, and the associate will actually be the front of the matter. So really, the associate is the one that is, the partner's reputation is at stake, because it's the associate that's doing all the work. So by doing a good job, you're essentially, building the relationship with the partner. They might get the next deal, and whilst again, they're the one who are sort of signing the engagement terms, you're the one doing the work, and you're the one who's keeping that business coming in. So whilst it's true that you don't necessarily get contacted and you don't sort of win the work, you're sort of instrumental on a day-to-day basis in ensuring that the work keeps coming in, because you're sort of the workhorse who's going to be doing those deals day in, day out.
Thank you. And Omar, another question for you. There has been a lot of news about junior solicitors and trainees being disciplined or struck off the register by the Regulation Authority. What sort of support is available from the firm during training and beyond?
I don't know if anyone wants to get anything off their chest, but contact. Well, actually, you might need to contact a litigator actually rather than me. So, to answer the question, I think a lot of these stories, when you read them, whether it be on Roll on Friday or all these sort of legal websites, it's the law firm. Their name gets sort of tracked through the mud. It's not just the individual. So the law firm's very keen to ensure that any of these stories don't make it to a tribunal or to a hearing. I'd say that these instances are very rare, and for anyone who's properly supervised, none of this should really be happening anyway. So I think it is very rare, and it's the way of the world that these odd instances will get blown out of proportion, and they'll sort of hit the top of these websites, and people will get worried about it. But quite frankly, it's just, and I do have sympathy, because sometimes it's people quite often just trying to cover a mistake, and it's not necessarily something malicious. It's I think I read one the other day where they'd left a file or a folder on a train, and they'd said that they'd left it at home, for example. That bit of dishonesty, just to trying to protect their career, that then costs them, because it's dishonesty. It goes to your character, and you hear all these stories of people, you could potentially go out and commit GBH, but it's almost worse as a solicitor if you don't pay your train fare, because that's dishonesty. Forget about beating someone up. That, yeah, fine, you can probably remain on the roll, but if you're dishonest, that's the main thing. So to answer the question there is support, but really that's not something that you should worry about. And I think just be honest. It's the best way forward. And people, particularly in this day and age, I remember one great story of someone trying to cover their tracks, and I'm sure, Sohail, Mandeep, your law firms are the same. At the bottom, you quite often have the list of offices. So if it's an international firm, you might have lots of cities there. And this person had done a great job of covering their tracks, and then they backdated a letter, but they used the wrong footer. So they had offices on the footer that weren't there at the date of the letter, for example. So little things like that, you think you've gotten away with it, you're never going to get away with it. And people, law firms track everything you do nowadays, particularly working from home. It's just best to have an honesty policy. And if you make a mistake, put your hand up. It's not the end of the world. We're not doctors. If we cut the wrong tube, no one's going to die. I think just be honest. That's the main thing. And you shouldn't have to worry.
Thank you, Omar. And the final question before we move on to the next quickfire round, it's for Mandeep. How has Shoosmiths' newly introduced reciprocal mentoring scheme changed the firm?
Well, it's so new I can't tell you, because it's literally only just started. So what this mentoring scheme is, it's reciprocal. So it's junior members of staff mentoring the senior leadership team and the board. And I'm actually in the programme, and because it's new, there are internal networks, so for minorities, LGBTQ+, and BAME, and they contacted people that are within those networks first. The idea is it's going to, as the programme developed, they're going to contact people from just in the firm wider that maybe aren't members of these networks. And it's about, at the moment, addressing underrepresentation of these groups in the legal sector, barriers to career progression, which may actually exist at Shoosmiths. It's not a soundbite. It's not something that the firm's doing. It's not really shouting about it externally. It's very much an internal thing, because the board, the senior leadership team, are really serious about wanting to know, because I think you can get to partner level and you can lose touch with what's going on, especially if you're heading up a national team. But by the time you get up to board level, you in a big firm, people are just numbers, they're just a name on a spreadsheet. So this is about those people, the CEO, the chairman, the directors getting involved with the day-to-day lives of people. And it's from associates up to partners are being part. There's only 16 pairs across the firm, and I don't know who I've been paired with yet, so I don't actually know too much about the scheme. So I've got my introductory meeting on Thursday, but it's all about inclusion at this moment, and I'd like to see it, and this is something that I will raise, I'd like to see it. Sometimes I think you don't really get to have an impact on, for example, the way that our team works. There's something that if they just made a little change, it would make a really big difference to how our team is able to work and bill and be more profitable. And as it goes up the ranks, so it has to go to the partner in charge of the team, then it goes to the division head, then it goes to the board, and it just gets diluted. And I think it's a really good opportunity to just connect with, I don't like the term, but with the foot soldiers that are doing the day-to-day work, because I think as you move up the ranks, you just get removed from that kind of that side of things. So it's a really, really exciting opportunity, and I don't know how it's going to work. So I know what the objectives are, and only time will tell. It's a 6-month program, and I don't know how often they're going to repeat it. I literally know, other than we were invited to apply, other than the application. If we'd have been having this next week, I could have told you a bit more, but I really don't know yet.
That's fine. Thank you for your insight into what you know so far about the scheme. Now we're just going to move on to the next round, which is the quickfire round, and being conscious of time because we're about to finish at 8 o'clock. So it's definitely going to be a very quick fire round. So this is open to all of you. The first one is anything you wish you knew either about the profession or the training before joining your respective firms or becoming solicitors.
I think it was just the point that I mentioned about think about your long-term plan, and just think about whether you'd like, for example, the option to move in-house. Think about whether you want to stay in London or if you want to live regionally close to family, and think about which firm would be right for that as well. And for me, I always said at A&O, I sort of became a more finance and DCM focused lawyer because that's what they were very good at. I think had I trained at another firm, maybe I would have gravitated towards, so for example, HSF is very strong on litigation and corporate. Maybe I would have gravitated towards those teams because that's, so I think it does matter which law firm you apply for. And I think that's been the message today. Don't just try and grab any training contract you can. Think about what's right for you. And there's always an opportunity post-qualification to move around, you know, it's as well. So I think it's, but I think you do set out your store with your training contract, and you do. I think Sohail is probably quite a unique example there of someone switching. I've genuinely not seen many people do that successfully. So it's, and I don't know if he'd recommend that at all, but it's. I think once you set out your stall, you qualify in a particular area, it's quite difficult to shift away from that unless you do something completely different, and for example, move away from law altogether. So, so yeah, I think that's what I've learned. It's maybe just thinking about your long-term plans and whether, you know, whether your particular seat or your particular qualification sort of fits that plan.
Thank you, Omar. Is there anything anybody else would like to add before I move on to the next question? Yeah.
No, nothing to add.
Okay. The next question is one thing you would do differently if you could start your professional journey again. So I think this touches on what you wish you knew, but if there's anything else you would do differently.
I'll say something a bit more personal, actually, and I'll leave it to Omar and Mandeep to perhaps say something a bit more work-related. But I mean, for me, I think if there was one thing I would rewind the clock and do differently, is I would be much more of my authentic self. We hear that a lot more these days with D&I being sort of at the forefront. But I'm a legal director now. I'm a practicing Muslim. I pray 5 times a day. Religion is hugely important to me. And in hindsight, I did or didn't do things at the time because I queried whether rightly or wrongly it will be seen as getting in the way of work expectations within the workplace. So, for example, when I was a junior lawyer, I didn't take the day off when it was Eid. I would just work through, almost feeling as though that would scupper the plans for the rest of the team in terms of completing on a deal. I think I was trying to conform, and in a way, I think that compromised me as a person. And then there came sort of a point about 5 years ago in my life where I just had the confidence to say that this is really important to me, and actually this is not going to be something I'm going to compromise on. And that has liberated me, and it's given me a new sense of confidence. You know, I drive to the mosque on a Friday. Everyone knows that for this period of time, he's out of the office. He's not attending any meetings. We don't put anything in. They also know that at various points of the day, I'm gonna go off and I'm gonna use the prayer room and the facilities. I won't fix meetings on Eid day now, just as I wouldn't expect anyone to fix meetings on Christmas Day. I wouldn't have a mediation on a Christmas Day, so I won't have a mediation on Eid Day. And I just wish, going back, that I would have had the confidence to do those things and make, you know, be more of my authentic self at that stage. And hopefully, I think, you know, for people like myself and others who are in a more senior position, we give our junior people the confidence to do just that, because we lead by example. So that's one of the things that I would do differently.
I've got personal as well, but it's not religious. It's from being a working mother. I didn't plan my career in that. I qualified into the litigation seat, and where I did my training contract, it wasn't really 6 months per seat. It was a smaller firm, so it was a bit of you were kind of put where you were needed as well, and that's what I qualified into. And I'll be honest, I didn't enjoy it for years. And if you do find yourself in that situation, have the courage early on in your career to say it's not right for you. And if you want to switch direction, go into a different area. But it's much easier to do it when you're less qualified. As you progress up the ranks and you get older and you get financial responsibilities, family and all the rest of it, it just becomes much more difficult to find the time even to do it. And I think I'll say that litigation is not a family-friendly role. I have 2 children. I worked, and I'd say about 5 or 6 years behind where I should be, where I would be had I not taken mat leave, had I not worked part-time, all of that kind of stuff. And I don't begrudge that, because maybe it's controversial to say, but you can't have it all. You can't work at that pace and raise a family. And I'm finding this at the moment, working from home. My boundaries are blurred. I am supposed to only work 4 days a week. I can't remember the last time I worked less than 5 or 6 days a week. I'm still working at 7 o'clock. I'll be honest and say sometimes I forget to feed my children, because you just get into what you're doing. And my youngest will come because they just keep going into the snack cupboard. And, you know, it's that kind of thing that if I had my time again, I would have. I remember when I was in a different firm, and I used to drop my son off at school and at nursery. And I had a new childminder, and she didn't tell me that there was a Christmas performance. And this was my firstborn, so, you know, everything's a milestone. And as I was dropping him off, they said, "Oh, don't forget at 11:30, it's the Christmas concert." And I got to work, and I worked locally, and I was so upset when I got, and I didn't feel like I could say to work, "It's my son's Christmas concert. I didn't know I need to go." Now it's not praying, but it's a similar thing. I block out, the school run is blocked out every single day, a little bit before and a little bit after. And when I'm arranging meetings, and even with external people, and people are understanding, I'll say, "Well, no, I've got to collect my children from school." And I think it's just echoing what Sohail said. It's about having the confidence. You know, we're not machines, we're people with families, and more and more law firms are looking for people that they don't want, like somebody said, a book nerd. They want, you know, they want a rounded character, and with a rounded character comes life, and it's about being able to fit it in.
Thank you very much to Sohail and Mandeep for sharing their personal experiences. I know that was a very valuable insight into the realities of working as a senior associate. Just a quick last question before we move on to closing statements and close off the evening. Are there any last tips for anyone due to undertake their training contract interview? And I know a bit of this was touched upon earlier, but any final tips?
I think my tip would be, I think this is, Mandeep touched on this earlier as well, it's just structure. So you can give someone the law, for example. It's about how you structure the answer. And so when I've conducted interviews, sometimes a candidate, they'll actually give content-wise a good answer, but at the end of it, because I've been quite intent on listening, when I go to actually make the notes as to what he or she said, I can't actually work out, I can't even put down 2 or 3 bullet points, whereas had they been really structured and said, I'm going to talk about X, Y, and Z. So I think normally in 3s, if you can talk in 3s or 4s, it's then very easy for the other person to follow exactly what you say. At the end of it, they can very easily put down 3 or 4 bullet points, and it just gives you a sense of confidence and that you know what you're talking about. The content could be exactly the same as someone who's just rambled on and made those same 3 or 4 points, but it's short, it's snappy, and it's memorable. And I think if you can do that, for example, in meetings as well, and it's something that I'm trying to work on as well, is trying to be short and snappy, it helps. And I think it's, as a junior, you always feel as though you need to keep talking, which I'm doing now, just to try and fill the gaps, fill the silence. Whereas actually you'll find that the more senior people have the confidence and they use silence to great effect, actually. So I think that's the sort of thing that I would say, is just think about how you structure and present yourself, because you're obviously bright to have got the interview in the first place. It's now just about how you convey yourself, as in Mandeep's example, where she gave the law. It's then how do you digest that and then give it back to the interviewer.
I would just add to that and just say, in addition, I think that's a really, really good point. I think the other thing is human nature is just to be attracted to confident and personable people, and that's whether it's inside the workplace or it's outside the workplace. And I think when you go into an interview, be positive, be confident, because people just generally are drawn to people who are confident and positive. You want to be around them. So interview with a smile. Be positive, be confident. Don't have this fear that you're going to get caught out by a technical question. Obviously, prepare thoroughly. Know the firm, know why you're applying, understand any gaps or shortcomings in your CV, be prepared to explain them, but then just enjoy the process. I think, you're being interviewed by normal human beings who want to know whether you're the sort of person that they can work with, that they can spend time with, and whether you have the right approach. And if you do all of that, I don't think you'll go far wrong.
Thank you, Sohail. And I'd like to just now open up the floor to all of you to make some closing comments before we round off the question and answer evening.
I might need to jump in. Actually, I've actually got a work call. I might need to jump off, unfortunately. So that's the commercial reality. I've actually, throughout this, we're actually pricing a sovereign bond. So it's, unfortunately, it never stops. So I just wanted to thank everyone actually for attending, and for the Law Simplified team and the other panelists for their time. And it's great. And I think just the fact that there are people like Sohail and Mandeep who are here, sharing their experiences, and it was really, touching the way that, you guys were talking about having the confidence. I suspect that Sohail, Mandeep, back then you didn't have someone to look up to who would have said, what, it's fine, you can take that Friday off, or you can take Eid off, or whatever. And I think hopefully for any students out there, you'll find that there's a new generation who I think are more understand work-life balance, understand the struggles of working mothers, understand the D&I aspect, and I think as we go through the ranks, hopefully things will be different. So those are my parting words, famous last words. But thanks again, and I do unfortunately have to drop now. But thanks again.
Thank you so much for joining us, Omar. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks you.
A lot.
Thank you, Omar. And now to Sohail or Mandeep to make some final comments.
Mandeep, do you want to go first?
I just want to wish everyone luck. It is it's just so competitive. And what our grad recruitment team was saying is it's getting more competitive, and the quality of candidates is getting better as well. So it's just making it even more and more competitive. And I've seen questions popping up in the panel. So I don't know if Jasmine or Fareen want to us to answer any questions, but I'm more than happy to, if you want us to answer those, like by email afterwards or something. Because I know there's nothing worse than going, like, you've got a burning question and you've asked it and then it doesn't get answered.
I think what we will do, Mandeep, is we'll collate them at the end, and then we'll see if perhaps we could email them out to you if you have any spare time. Sorry, Sohail, I think it was your turn there. I'd interrupted.
No, that's fine. So all I'm going to say is just thank you for this opportunity. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think I've learned a lot by listening to Mandeep and Omar. I wish I'd had a similar sort of opportunity to do that before I embarked on my legal career and journey. So yeah, I think it's been an invaluable sort of hour and a half listening to Omar and Mandeep. I've hugely benefited. I'm on LinkedIn. My email address is on the website. So if there are people who've got questions, feel free to reach out and contact. I certainly will if I can. I try and make it a proactive effort not to ignore messages that students send out. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to who've been through that process, that journey, and sort of have that position to assist and share where we can. But just to say good luck to everyone. It's a great career. It's it has its challenges. It's difficult, but it's hugely rewarding. There are lots of pros for this career. So just continue to persevere, and I'm sure you'll be a success.
Thank you very much, and thank you to both of you for attending.